Welcome to Pera's Playbook. This is your host, Alex Pera. Let's open up our playbook and see who our guest is. Please enjoy. Welcome to episode 178 of Pera's Playbook. Today we're joined by Steve Lynch, lead guitarist and original founding member of the 80s rock band Autobiography. Steve's going to join the list of other 80s rockers we've had on the podcast. So happy to have Steve on here and talk some music, some 80s hair metal. How's it going, Steve?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Alex.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking some time. I'm a huge fan of most genres of music, but my parents always liked, I grew up listening to 80s hair metal. They've got Hair Nation on and Sirius XM in the car, and so I grew up listening to all that stuff, and I love it. So I'm happy to talk to you.
Oh yeah, it was a fun era. It was a really fun era. All the songs were about having a good time and everything. There weren't very many sad songs. It was all about partying.
Exactly. Good. They're very upbeat. They're good songs to listen to if you're having a party or hanging out with the guys or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, good times, no doubt.
When I'm talking to musicians, I always like to kind of hear who their musical influences are. I think it's interesting to see where their inspiration came from.
Yeah.
So when you were a kid, I mean, who did you listen to mainly?
Well, the Beatles are the ones that got me into listening to the whole rock thing. I mean, my mom was really into Elvis, and I loved Elvis, but then the Beatles came along, and that spoke more to me. They played on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964, and I was 9 years old, and I just fell in love with it. But then when Hendrix came out with his debut album, Are You Experienced, in 1967, that really, really got to me. I went, oh my God, this is what I've got to do. And that music spoke to me. And then I also listened to Jeff Beck, especially the Jeff Beck group when Rod Stewart was singing with him, and then later when he went on his solo career. And then I also listened to a lot of Pink Floyd, especially Dark Side of the Moon. That's got to be my favorite album of all time. And then, of course, the Rolling Stones, and probably my number one favorite group was, aside from Pink Floyd, was Led Zeppelin.
Okay.
So, yeah.
When did you start playing the guitar? How old were you?
Well, I was in 1968. I started playing bass because there was another kid down the block that already played guitar, and so he said, "Why don't you play bass?" And so I thought, okay, yeah. And so I got a cheap little bass guitar, and we started jamming together and everything. But then when Hendrix passed away in September 18th of 1970, I thought, you know what? I've always wanted to just play guitar, and it was that date that I traded in my bass. And I got a Fender Stratocaster like Hendrix played, and it hasn't changed since. That was 1970, and I'm still doing it today. So,
were you self-taught?
I was in the beginning, yeah, because there were no teachers up where I lived in the northern area of Seattle. And so, but I did have a teacher in West Seattle later on, probably around 1976, and I started taking from this guy named Don Mock. He was like this incredible jazz fusion player, which is rock and jazz. He was teaching out of West Seattle music, and so I was taking lessons from him. But then I was already touring from 1973. I started touring, in a professional band, and we were just playing, some originals, but mainly top 40 stuff. And so I played in 3 different bands up there. So I was always gone. And so I called him up, called up the music store to set up more lessons with him. And when I was in Montana in 1977, and they said, well, he's not here anymore. He's now down in, he's down in Los Angeles. They're starting up a new school called the Guitar Institute of Technology. So I called up down there, and I actually got him on the phone, and he said, Steve, quit your bands. He said, sell your gear and get your ass down here. And 3 months later, I was there. So, and that completely changed my life, going to the Guitar Institute, because it ended up being a very prestigious school. I learned everything I could possibly imagine there, and that's when I started on the whole two-handed tapping technique. Well, I had been doing it already since 1975. but not to that extent. There was this guy, Emmett Chapman, who did a clinic right in the beginning of one, like in March or April when I first started going to the Guitar Institute in 1978. And he did this. He did a demonstration on this instrument called the stick, and it's you play it with five on five. Your left hand plays on five strings that are the lower kind of bass strings, and your right hand plays on the upper strings, which are more like the treble strings, where you play solos and chord inversions and melodies and stuff like that. And so he showed me a couple of things at the end of the seminar because he mentioned during it that he had gotten so far on guitar that he had to create this instrument to accompany himself, so that it's like the left hand on the piano, playing the lower register and the right hand playing the upper register. So he came up with this instrument. But I asked him after the clinic, I said, can you show me a couple of things on the guitar? And I handed him my guitar, and he said, well, you look at here, and you're playing this portion of the scale like A minor pentatonic with your left hand. He says, well, then you can go up with your right hand, and you can play an extension of that scale, another position. And he just went, and I went, that's it. That's it. Because like I said, I've been doing it for, a few years already. But then when he did that, I just dedicated myself to that technique. I mean, completely. So everything I learned for the rest of the year while I was going to the Guitar Institute, I wrote it down two-handed. I made up these guitar necks, and I had circles, squares, triangles, and diamond shapes around these notes. And so you knew the order in which to play the note because they were all numbered, and what each hand was doing. The right hand was the circles and the diamonds, and then the left hand was the squares and the triangles. That's what I'm trying to remember. And so I ended up writing a book about it called The Right Touch, because your right hand's touching. And so that was published way back in 1979. And then I wrote two more books later on, but it explains how to play that whole technique using all four fingers on each hand.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if it was all self-experimentation or if you were
Yeah,
taught by somebody, but it sounds like it was a combination of both yourself experimenting with
right.
it and some guidance from somebody else.
Right, exactly. And also, there's a couple, I saw, this guy, Steve Buffington in Seattle, who was always, messing around with it. And so I asked him what he was doing. He showed me a couple of things too. And that's what initially got me kind of going on it. And so, that was it. And then when I went to the Guitar Institute and saw Emmett Chapman, I just went, whoa, that's it. I'm going to dedicate myself to that. And so I did.
And you really got to showcase that on the song Hammerhead.
Yes. Oh,
Kind of
yeah.
the whole song. That's what you're
Yeah,
doing.
it's like a minute and a half of this, very complex scales and interval skips and triads and everything that I'm throwing in there. And a couple of people have come close to it because I have a video op that explains how to play it step by step. But it's an extremely difficult piece to play. So there's only been a couple of people that have actually been able to nail it. So,
Yeah, I think it's incredible when you watch guitarists or drummers or whatever when there's a solo. Like when I'm at a concert, I love when a band has the guitarist, and they
yeah,
have something that's just focused on him. He can show off his skills. I've been to
yeah,
so many rock concerts and it sticks out, and it's like, man, look at that guy play. Like
right.
a couple of years ago I saw Great White, and I think it was Mark Kendall, and he
Uh-huh.
was just shredding away. And
Yeah,
Brad Gillis with Night Ranger just
yeah.
shredding away. And and
Both
I
great
love when bands
players.
do
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I know both those guys. They're both great players and great human beings. Very cool.
Yeah. So I always think it's just it blows me away. You're kind of just like, yeah, like the whole song is, it's a great song, but when that musician gets to kind of go off and take it themselves, kind of take the stage and show off a little
Yeah,
skill, it's
absolutely.
like, wow.
Yeah, show their goods, man. Show it off. Absolutely. Why not?
Right. Because
Yeah, I
I
always
feel
just.
like I was just gonna say, I feel like sometimes people watch musicians and they're like, well, that looks easy. Like anybody can play the guitar. Like that can't be that hard. But when you can show off some of that skill, it really like, puts you in your
Yeah,
place. Like, wow.
yeah. I've had discussions with that quite a bit throughout my career, where they go, like, well, piano is much more difficult to play. And I say, no, actually, when you're playing with your bare hands directly onto the strings, you have to be much, much, much more articulate. And with piano, you don't bend strings. You don't have to learn all the phrasing techniques like what I just mentioned was bending, sliding, vibrato, all these different kinds of things that make guitar what it is, where you can really experiment. Everybody has a different vibrato. Everybody uses their sliding different and their bending techniques and all that. And so it's much, much, much more difficult to play.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
It's all difficult in its own. I mean, I feel like people, whatever it is, there's always people, right, sitting on their couch who think they could do it. You're
yeah,
watching golf and you're like, oh, that guy missed a putt. That's easy. I
right,
can do
right.
that,
Yeah.
right? Until you step in the moment and try it yourself.
Yeah,
I bought a
exactly.
guitar a couple of summers ago, and I'm going to teach myself how to play guitar, and that
Right.
really hasn't happened much yet.
Remember when oh, what was it? Yeah, that's right, exactly. Remember when Guitar Hero came out? And it was
Yeah.
all these guys were saying, "Man, I'm good on Guitar Hero. I'm ripping it up here." And they said, "So this guitar is going to be a breeze for me to play." And so they would come to my school. I had a music school in Seattle, and they'd come to take lessons from me. And they would come in and they would take a few lessons and they go, oh man, this is really, really hard to do. And so it kind of shut them up about the fact that they thought that they would just be able to come in and pick up guitar and be able to blaze away on it. No, no, no. It's a whole different thing from just pressing buttons. It's a whole other ballgame. So,
Right. Yeah. The few couple intro videos I watched, I was like, man, it's hard to move how do they do that? Like trying to move
yeah.
my fingers. I'm like, man, they're all stiff. I feel like I can't move it where it's supposed to. It doesn't bend that way.
Oh,
And then,
yeah.
watch a
Yeah.
video like you and Hammerhead, and you're just going up and down that thing. Like,
Yeah. And that took me a long time to put that together. And then when I went into the studio and I recorded it on that video that you watched, that's three different guitars playing that. So when I did it in the studio, I had three guitars playing it all, and they're all together. So what you're hearing when you listen to that, that's three different guitars playing the same thing.
wow. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would have never known that.
Yeah, it was really hard to get them all in sync too. They're not perfectly in sync, which kind of gives it a cool sound. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's slightly out of
Right.
sync because you can't get the timing exact because there's no rhythm behind it. There's no drums or anything. So you kind of have to just do it by winging it, by practicing and practicing. So it took me several takes in the studio to get all three fairly lined up.
Yeah, it's a cool piece of music. Where did the idea come? I mean, like, did you
Well,
tell the guys in the band, hey, I got this idea, or
oh no, what it was I had this series of exercises that I did, and I was putting together, all these different ideas, and I thought, oh, well, this kind of sounds cool going into this, and then I kept on adding parts to it, and then they said one time they said, for live, they said, why don't you go into, play a guitar solo or something? And I said, I got the perfect thing. And this was after the first album. And so, on the next tour after the Van Halen tour, then I decided, well, I'm gonna start playing a solo. And so when I first played it, they went, yeah, you've got to play that in each different show now, because it really went over well on that the first time that I did it. So I just kept
yeah,
doing it.
that's awesome. Well, let's talk Autograph. You guys had a lot of success in the '80s. Obviously, Turn Up the Radio was your
Yeah.
biggest hit, and it's one of those. You can throw it as kind of like an iconic '80s song that people
Yeah. It's
recognize, and
right. It's an anthem, and
yeah,
when we first recorded it, RCA Records, who we signed to, they didn't really care for it. They thought that the song "Send Her to Me," which is a really good song, but they thought that one should be the first single. And we're going, no, 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 you guys don't understand. This song's called "Turn Up the Radio." Radio stations are going to absolutely love it, and they did. So what we did was we went into the studio over 2 days, 2 8-hour days, and we said, this this is Autograph. We're telling you, turn it up, KNAC. And we did all the call letters for all the K and all the W stations all across the whole United States. That's why it took take 2 8-hour days for us to go in and say that, and get all our voices linked up and everything. It was a difficult thing to do. But then we sent out the single to all these radio stations with that, saying that, with it, and those radio stations just play the heck out of it because they love hearing the call letters to their station, and then it goes right into the song. So that was a huge success. Everybody was playing it. It just caught on like wildfire. So
Yeah, that's clever, right?
yeah, nobody had thought of it before, and we thought, hey, it's the radio. So let's
Right.
let's do the call letters to that station and say, turn it up. You
That's
know,
perfect.
yeah,
So would you say, what you were saying about how the record company kind of wanted you to go with a different song, and I've heard a few
yeah,
other musicians kind of like the record company will maybe try to push them a different direction than they
right,
necessarily want to go. Was that pretty common? Like you send in your
yeah.
stuff and they tell you how they think it should be, and it might not match your vision.
Well, yeah, it is pretty common actually. When we first signed with them, we were all guys. We'd been around the block. I mean, when we signed with them, I was basically 29, almost 30 years old, and then the other guys were in their early 30s. So we had been, we'd been on several albums. We'd done tons of studio work and played live a lot already. So we weren't new guys on the block. So we were kind of telling them how to do their job, because a lot of them were more newer to the business. So we were saying, no, 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 this is the way it works here, okay? And we'll call the shots. And so they pretty much let us do it. But they do try to take control of pretty much everything, especially with the younger bands. But the older guys that have been on the block, they don't put up with it. So
Right.
it's just like with Queen. This is an interesting story. Is like with the song Bohemian Rhapsody, the record label said absolutely no way that's going on the album. And they fought for it, and fought for it, and fought for it. The label's going to drop them because they absolutely refused to do it. And it ended up being a mega hit all around the world. And to this day, people are still learning it and singing along with it and everything, and radio stations are still playing it. And, but so there you go. It's like the radio station, they didn't have a clue. They're looking for that 3.5 minute single where they can
Yeah.
just turn a buck on it, But what about the art of it? This is the thing. It's these musicians and these guys, at that time, Queen had been around the block for a little bit. They've been playing out for quite a few years. And so you look at it and you go, okay, well, the record label is a business. They have no idea what the art is, what the musician is feeling inside, and that's where they kind of miss out. Like when you listen, especially to like Dark Side of the Moon or any of the Led Zeppelin stuff, a lot of their songs, what they did was they blended them together so they wouldn't be played as 45s. Of course, the radio stations got so many requests for it, they did make them into singles, right? Or 45s was what it was called when they just released a single. But the thing is they stayed true to the art of it, and they just said, we don't care about the record state, the record companies or the radio stations. We really just want to play what we really feel inside. And that was the best decision they could have possibly made, because that way we got the art that they put out, with all those bands in the 60s and the 70s, So I'm really glad they stuck to their guns and stuck to the music.
Right. Yeah. If the record company's calling the shots, then I don't know, the music's not authentic.
Yeah.
It's not, like you said, what the artist is really feeling. I mean, most music, a lot of the 80s hair band music, it's about having
Yeah.
a good time, having a party. But there's a
Yeah,
lot of
absolutely.
music, somebody's got a personal something that happened to them. It could be something really deep that they're singing about.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
it's got strong meaning. And if the record company starts butting in, then that's going to change the whole purpose of the song.
Right. The record companies want it to be played on the radio and to reach as many people as possible. They don't really care that the artist is actually telling a story of something that happened to them. And that story usually relates to things that have happened to other people so they can relate to it. And so, it's just being truthful is what it is. And like I said, I'm so glad that they really stuck to what was right than by releasing the stuff that they really felt inside.
Yeah, you can really tell when music is
Yes,
authentic, and
yes,
you can tell what is
absolutely.
just we're just trying to pump out more and more hits. And I feel
Right.
like you hear that more nowadays. There's just
Mhm.
less authentic music. Like the lyrics aren't
Less.
that strong, and it's just like and it just kind of sounds like everything else. There's nothing
Yeah,
special
and
or unique about it.
where that initially kind of started with just pumping out the hits. It started with disco, and that was just all geared for dance only. Basically, people weren't. Uh, so you can sing along with some of the songs, but there wasn't a real deep story on most of it anyway. It was just about dancing, and which was fine. But then, just like you said, now even nowadays, it's like people are not telling their true story, what they really have, an experience that they've gone through, or a tough time in their life, or an exhilarating time, or with happiness and everything. They're not able to share that, and it's kind of a blank field. I mean, when you say it that way, then I can definitely connect to what you're explaining.
Yeah, I've been getting more and more into like folk and Americana because the
Oh yeah,
lyrics are so good and deep and
yeah,
just
and they're
that,
telling stories. They're telling
right.
stories, and that's what's really cool. I love that too. I got into that with Bob Dylan in his early
Yep.
days, and so yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, I love Bob Dylan or Jim Croce and Gordon
Hmm.
Lightfoot, and then modern
Oh
guys
yeah,
like
yeah.
Tyler
You're naming
Childers
all
and
the greats.
yeah.
Yeah, you're
Oh
naming
yeah.
all the greats from back in the late '60s, early '70s. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. You guys that maybe I mean Bob Dylan has a unique voice
Yeah.
that kind of people get drawn to, but you wouldn't
Yes.
say like, man, that's angelic or like it's not
Yeah. Right.
it's unique, but it's not I feel like you
Right.
said, people are listening for the lyrics, the story, and then it also has a
Yes.
unique sound.
Right. It's like um, if you had Freddie Mercury maybe singing the lyrics, probably wouldn't work out so well. You know what I mean? Because Freddie Mercury is just like the perfect vocalist. And of course, he sings with so much emotion and everything. But Bob Dylan's just he's not known for being a brilliant singer. He's just known for being a great writer and a fantastic storyteller. That's what it's all about. And I look at it like also. I've told my students throughout the years, like I said, I owned a music school in Seattle for like 20 years. And of course, now I'm down in Florida for almost 10 years now, and I've kind of retired from that. But what I used to tell my students was that, hey, you can learn all this really fast stuff, but what are you saying? I mean, what are you saying with your guitar solo? The guitar solo should have a beginning, a middle part, and an ending to it, and it should fit the song perfectly. It's like, getting up there and vocally screaming through the whole song without really saying anything at all. And so I told him you should pay as much attention to that spot where you're soloing. It doesn't even matter if you're just playing a melody line, just for something that fits the song. It's just like the lyricist, the vocalist wrote out for for that song, particularly the lyrics that he wants to convey and the story that he wants to convey. And so I told him that, and they said, "Yeah, good point." And then because back then everyone was just getting, and they still are, just getting into the super fast playing and the sweeping arpeggios and stuff. And I'm going, that stuff really just doesn't work with most of the songs. And that's just playing really heavy metal stuff. That's the only time it really works.
Yeah. I think what you said, like, the solo has to tell a story. It's kind of
Yes.
like when you think of classical music, Mozart, right?
Uh,
All instrumental, there's no words, but it's telling a story.
right. Right.
So if it's kind of a similar
Yes,
connection.
it is. Absolutely. Absolutely. Same thing.
Yeah. So we live in obviously a different era with record
Hmm.
deals and the radio
Yeah.
has kind of died out a little bit. Spotify, Apple Music, that's big. Satellite radio, Sirius
Yeah.
XM. Um, but with all that, it makes music more accessible,
It
and you
does.
can listen to
Yes,
anything. And I think in a way it's kept certain genres alive, like a station
absolutely.
like Hair Nation, completely devoted
Right.
to this music.
Because and you're absolutely right about that, Alex, because if you look at if you look at these radio stations only playing stuff that's popular now, they change with the times. Of course, they always have. And if you look at that, then you just, of course, they have classic radio stations, where they play old rock and stuff like that. And like you said, Hair Nation and all that. But the thing is that most of it would have gotten swept under the rug because it's yesterday's music, and it really does help keep it alive. And then on the other hand, for the musicians to get their stuff to be heard, the only way you could do it before was to get signed to a major label, and that major label pushes it onto the radio stations. You don't have to go through that anymore. The record companies are pretty much fading out. You still have publishing deals and stuff like that, and you still have marketing deals that you put together, for a big push on your material. But record deals, Another thing that I like is the fact that you can just release, however many songs you want to. You see, back then you had to have, 10 songs on an album. If you put 12 songs on, you didn't get paid for the last two. Okay. But then most people would just listen to one or two of their favorite songs on the album. The other ones wouldn't get radio play either, not at all. But when you release one song at a time and really let that, soak in for a few months before releasing another one, then they really pay a lot of attention to each single that you're putting out.
Yeah. And now with like Spotify, people can have timers set. This
Right,
album is going to be released at midnight. I can go listen
right.
to it instantly. As soon as it's up there, I can
Yeah,
hear it right away. And by
right,
morning, it can have
exactly.
a million listens.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. Which is cha-ching.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting, like TikTok and Instagram and all these different
Uh-huh.
things have brought back songs from the 60s, 70s, and 80s because that little clip sounds good with whatever somebody's doing on their
Yes,
TikTok video. And that's
absolutely.
brought artists back into the charts, or people that they didn't their song didn't hit back then, but now all of a sudden somebody likes it and they're
Right.
spreading it all over click after click.
Yeah, it lets you be rediscovered again, sometimes more so than you were the first time around. What's this
Yeah.
little thing here say? Oh, okay. Okay. There was a little thing that came up on the screen I had to get rid of. Okay.
It's got to feel good as an artist though, to look 40, 50 years later, right, at music and see like
Yeah.
people are still listening to my stuff. They still love it. It's
Yeah.
still on
Now
the.
it's been over 40 years since Turn Up the Radio came out, and people are still loving it, and that's so cool that people's they send me pictures of their radio in their car and it says Turn Up the Radio on there. Like, oh, that's awesome. And they love it. And they say, I watched it on, this program. They played the original video and all that. And I think it's really cool. I'm always very happy when they send that to me. It means they're paying attention. That makes
Right.
me feel good. Yeah.
Yeah. And you did something right for your music
Yeah,
to stay
exactly.
along
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And you think also like a lot of our material has been used in movies, in TV shows, in video games like Grand Theft Auto, Vice City, and Guardians of the Galaxy, and all that. And so I'll get this big deposit into my bank account, and like from Universal or BMI or something, and I'll call them up and I'll say, where'd this come from? They go, oh, you're in a new video game called Grand Theft Auto Vice City. And I said, so I can spend this money? And they go, yeah, yeah, it's yours.
That's
Go for
awesome.
it. But we did it. We made our song so that it's public domain. So that means anybody can use it without asking our permission, which really makes it. That's why our songs are used so much. But they still have to pay us for it. You know what I mean? But you can use it for whatever you want. Just as long as we get paid, and we get paid a lot more because of the fact that we do have that option where you can just play it and then pay later.
Right.
That's
Less
it.
barriers for them to go
Yeah,
through.
absolutely. Yeah, there's no hoops to jump through or anything. It's just very straight ahead. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's talk about your autobiography. You just
uh,
released that recently. When did you start writing that, and what gave you the idea? Like, hey, I want to write an autobiography.
oh, well, what happened was for years, just my life is very bizarre. There's all these crazy things that I've been through, not just in music, but just in everything. I mean, you'll read the stories in there, and you go, my God, there's 2 degrees of separation with this and 3 degrees of separation of this, and you've experienced this firsthand and all that. But what people kept saying to me throughout the years is, I said, my God, you've got to write a book about all this. And so I always had that in my mind. So what I did is I started writing down single sentence reminders of a different story. Like I'll just write a sentence and then that would remind me, oh yeah, that's that story. You know what I mean? And so then I'd be able to recall it because I've talked about it so much. And so before you know it, I had like 200 different sentences, but I couldn't fit all that into a book, of course, because that's 200 different topics, different stories. And so I decided when COVID hit, I couldn't go out and play live. I couldn't teach. I was pretty much confined to home. So what I started to do, what I decided at that point was I thought, this is a good time to start writing the book. And so I did, and it took a couple of years. By the end of COVID, I pretty much had it written. But then I signed a deal with the first publishing company I went to. They just grabbed it, and so I signed with them right away. They just absolutely loved it, and so um, I didn't have to shop it around to a bunch of publishers just like that. Pretty much, same thing with my first book, The Right Touch. I had a publishing deal, like as soon as I wrote it. So anyway, I wrote down the most interesting stories. And like I said, it took a couple of years to do it. By the time COVID ended, then I had the book completed. But then it got delayed because they were way behind. The publishing company was way behind because of COVID and kept on going through these delays, which was a good thing because, there was a lawsuit that was going on with people using the name Autograph, and they didn't have any permission. They didn't have licensing for it. So basically that happened and I ended up being victorious, very victorious at the end of it. And so then there was also I got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Autograph was basically invited to have a display there, and so now my original guitar is there, and Randy ran the bass player's basses in there. And then I got engaged while we were at that ceremony for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and so I asked my then girlfriend, to get married. So we're still setting a date. We're just waiting for a little bit longer until we're relocating over to Boca Raton, Florida. Then we'll do the deed. But there was just a lot of stuff that happened that I added into the book afterwards. And so I'm glad it was delayed. It seemed like this was when it was supposed to actually happen. So
Yeah.
it worked out very well.
Yeah. Well, congrats on the engagement and all of that extra planning that goes into.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I did it with a hybrid publisher, which means that you have to do all the work yourself. You basically have to, they give you ideas for cover design and all that, but I designed the cover on the book. Basically, and their artist also helped me with it, their designer. And so she put together the final things on it. But I had to do most of the editing. They had editors come in and give me suggestions, but you see, it's my story, so I can't use anything that's going to take away from my story and the way that I tell it. If you read the book, this is the way that I actually speak. You see what I mean? So
Yeah.
it ended up being one of those things where I used a few of their suggestions, but realistically, not very many. I did most all the editing, which is mainly grammar corrections and stuff. I did all that myself, and I read through it and through it and through it, and I edited it probably 11 times, to shorten things down because I'm a little bit winded, as you can tell from just talking to me, as far as discussing things. And so I was that way in the book. And they say, hey, you might want to trim the story down a little bit. And so I did that. So it ended up
How,
being, instead of 400 pages, I brought it down to like 278. So
oh, wow. So you really
yeah.
trimmed it down.
Well, yeah, there was parts where I had to actually take out chapters because it was 44 chapters long initially, and now I think it's down to 27. So, you know,
Wow.
yeah.
Is
I
it released now?
Yeah. Well, you can pre-order it now on Amazon. You can get it on barnesandnoble.com, or you can get it from bookshop.com. So it's amazon.com, barnesandnoble.com, and bookshop.com. But the official release is actually tomorrow, 9 a.m.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that's when the press release goes out. So this interview's got perfect timing on it. So
Yeah.
but people can go check it out. They can check out, of course, a lot of my videos. If they're not familiar with my playing, they can go to YouTube and just type in my name, Steve Lynch, and they can see a lot of stuff from Autograph. So there's just tons of videos on there, and I do a lot of guitar solos on there and explain them and all that. But that way they can see what my playing is like. And then also you can go to my pages like Steve Lynch on Facebook. So if you put in Steve Lynch guitar, it usually comes right up. And then there's also Autograph Band on Facebook. And then we also have an Autograph one on Instagram. I have a personal Instagram too. Excuse me, Steve Lynch Official. And so, and then there's an X one. Excuse me. And then so it's pretty much all over the place. You
Yeah.
know.
A lot of ways for
Excuse me.
fans to stay connected with you and what you're doing and
Yeah,
the classic stuff the band is, which I think is awesome that there's different ways for people to watch videos and stay connected and
right.
I
And you can find the links too on these different pages where to buy the book. Everything it's on all my social media. So if you wanted to pre-order it now, you can do that, or tomorrow it will be available
yeah,
everywhere. So there's
yeah.
no waiting.
Well,
Yeah,
you've got a lot of exciting stuff going on right now, weddings and
yeah,
books and all kinds
yeah,
of stuff.
exactly. Yeah, I'm staying pretty busy, but it's
Right,
all
yeah,
good
and
there.
you still got time to do all these interviews.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Like I said, I had one 3:30 now, yours at 5, and then I have another one at 6:30 tonight. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule and squeezing
absolutely.
me and my listeners in. It was a pleasure chatting and I hope the book has great response.
Yeah, it's called Confessions of a Rock Guitarist by Steve Lynch, and I think people are really going to love it.
Yeah. No, it's a great title and if you have that many stories,
Yeah.
people love the stories. I love the
Yeah.
stories. That's why I love, I don't like, unless I've got somewhere to be. If I've got a guest that
Yeah.
just keeps talking and talking and telling more stories, I don't want to just cut them off and say you're done.
Sure.
Like we're
Yeah.
because
All right.
you can't get that stuff. Some of it,
Yeah.
right? Like it's
Yeah.
authentic, the real thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
and like you said, you wrote your book, so they're
Yeah.
your stories. Nobody came in there and changed it and like, oh,
Right.
edit this and make it different. Like it's you telling it the way it happened, which I think
Yeah.
is great.
Exactly. Exactly. So, that's why I'm glad I went with a hybrid publisher, because that way I had control over everything. Like I said, it
Yeah,
was a lot of work on my part, because usually when you hand a book in to a major publishing company like Kensington or Simon and Schuster, they take control of it and they'll change stuff in it. And that's one thing I didn't want them to do, is change anything, because these are my stories. And I did it chronologically just the way that they happened. And so if they went in and then and if they changed the cover, they have the right to do that. They can even change the title of the book once you hand it in. But I said, no, no, I don't want any of that. My agent told me about all these things. And so I just said, no, I'm going to go with a hybrid one, a hybrid publishing company, one that I have control over.
yeah. Well, more work for you, but now you're happier with the result.
Absolutely. I'm completely happy with the results.
Yeah, and that's what counts.
Yeah, exactly.
All right,
Yeah.
well, Steve, I appreciate it. Thanks for hopping on.
All right. Thanks, Alex. Pleasure being there.
Thanks for listening. Please stay tuned for more episodes soon.